Hey everybody, it's me, Charlotte like Charlotte's Web, and today we are going to continue to read some more of Lost in the Book, Chapter 19. Let's get started. Belle punched her pillow. She fluffed it, kneaded it, plumped it, and finally laid her head back down onto it. But it was no use. She couldn't fall asleep again. Sighing, she rolled onto her side. For this position, she could see the row of windows on the far wall of her room, and the moon, so solitary and remote, shining in the night sky. She wondered if it felt as lonely as she did. She knew what had caused her loneliness, telling Chip about Villeneuve, Agatha, Pierre Robert, and most of all her beloved father, Maurice. Belle usually did her best not to think of him. It was too painful. But tonight, no matter how hard she tried to push them away, memories of him and of her happy life together flooded her heart. She cherished those memories because in them she had her father. Because in them she and her father were together again. But they tortured her too, for they unscorched something she could barely bring herself to accept, that she would never, ever see him again. Belle had made a deal, a dark, dreadful bargain, and now she had to keep it. All because her father had picked a rose from the beast's garden for her. Why didn't I ask for a daisy? A sunflower, a carnation, she whispered, filled with regret. If only I had, I wouldn't be here. She remembered the day she'd lost him so clearly. He'd gone to a market in a neighboring town to sell some of the beautiful music boxes he made. Constructed to look like castles, cathedrals, and palaces, each music box was unique and involved hours of painstaking work. She recalled the care he'd taken in gilding a miniature Versailles with a paintbrush and magnifying glass, or shaping the stained glass windows of a tiny Notre Dame with a diamond-tipped cutter. What would you think of me? Sorry, my mistake. I read that wrong. What would you like me to bring you? He'd asked Belle, as he'd set off, his wagon hitched to Philippe. Only a rose, Papa, she replied. Well, that they did. Let me see, sorry, she replied, well aware that they did not have money to spend on presents. She'd been hanging out to the wash when Philippe had returned home without the wagon or her father. Take me to him, she'd said to the horse, terrified that her father had been in an accident or been set upon by robbers. Philippe had taken her through the woods to an ancient castle, deep within a dark forest. She dismounted in the castle's keep, calling out to whoever owned it, but no one answered her. Bravely she entered the castle and searched for her father. She finally found him, imprisoned in a tower. Papa, she cried out when she saw him, thrusting her hand through the bars of the cell. Belle, is that you? He'd said, clasping it. How did you find me? Belle, you must leave here. Belle, you must leave here at once. This castle is alive. Now go before he finds you. Just then the beast appeared to Belle, shouting and raging. Belle had been frightened at first, but then she'd stood up to him and demanded that he release her father. When the beast refused, she'd offered to take her father's place. Maurice was clearly ill, and Belle promised him that she'd find a way to escape. But she knew that she couldn't leave him trapped in that tower. The beast had granted her request, and Maurice had been released. That was the last Belle had seen of him. 100 times a day she thought about him, worried about him, missed him. They'd always had each other, but he was alone now. Who would look after him? Who would make his morning coffee just the way he liked it? Who would see to it that he wore his woolen muffler when the weather turned cold? Tears threatened again, just as they had when she'd told Chip his bedtime story. Desperate to distract herself, Belle sat up in her bed and threw back the covers. She slid her feet into a pair of warm slippers, then shrugged into her woolen robe and watched the windows. Lacy swirls of frost framed the glass panes. It had snowed after she and the beast had come in from skating, and a thick blanket of white glittered in the moonlight. As she gazed out at the wintry night, the enormous grandfather clock downstairs began to strike the hour, its deep, doleful chime echoing throughout the castle. "Midnight," Belle said when it finished. "I have to get some sleep." She looked at her bed without much hope, though knowing full well that she would only toss and turn if she got back into it. Back at home, when she couldn't sleep, her father had always made her a warm drink and let her read by candlelight until she stole over. Until sleep stole over her. A cup of hot milk would be just the thing, she thought. That and a good book. She lit the candle on her bedside table by holding its wick to the glowing coals in her fireplace, then left her room, taking care to step quietly so that she wouldn't awake anyone. Coals were still glowing in the kitchen's hearth, too. They threw off a welcoming warmth. A cast iron pot containing the morning's oatmeal had been hung over them to cook slowly overnight. A large bowl of bread dough covered with a cloth had been set on the wooden table to rise. Baskets of apples, pears, and quince sat next to them, ready to be made into pies and compotes. Belle loved the coziness of the kitchen. It was her second favorite room in the castle after the library. Concierge was sound asleep, and she didn't want to wake him. So she heated milk in a small pot over the coals. Careful not to disturb Chip and Mrs. Potts, she got a mug, poured in it the hot milk, and added a spoonful of honey. After, she washed the pot and put it away. She made her way to the library, her mug in one hand, her candle in the other. It was cold and dark there, but wood and kindling had been laid in the fireplace. Belle lit the kindling with her candle, and a few minutes later she had a cheerful fire blazing. 2 comfortable chairs faced each other across the hearth. A low table stood between them. It made a very inviting reading nook. "All I need now is a book," Belle said. She wished she could visit Nevermore, but was unsure if the book's time followed real time. It wouldn't do to knock on the Countess's door in the middle of the night. Picking up her candle once more, Belle had made her way down a row of bookcases and nearly stumbled over a book that lay open on the floor. She bent down to peer at it. "Fearsome Pirates of the High Seas," the title read. pure roots, tales of times past, and the edition of Aesop's Fables lay next to it. Chip, Belle said, shaking her head. Like most children, he was good at taking things out, but not so good at putting them away again. Belle reshelved the pirate book and Harold's fairy tales. She was just about to put the book of fables away, too, when she paused, instead captivated by its beautiful cover. It showed a picture of a lion holding out its bloodied paw. A man stood nearby, reaching his hand out to the suffering creature. Androcles, she murmured. The story of the runaway slaves and the lion he helped was one of her favorite fables. Oh, runaway slave and the lion he helped was one of her favorite fables. Her father had often read it to her. Her eyes roved over the picture, taking in Androcles' brave expression and the lion's agonized one. And as they did, Chip's words came back to her. He's the way he is because he's hurting too. Just like the lion, Belle whispered. Chip, you're a genius. She stood up, excitement coursing through her. She'd just come up with a way to draw the beast out, to get him to talk to her, maybe even answer her questions. Sometimes words alone were not enough, because they spoke only to the head. But a story, one in which the words were strung together as beautifully as pearls on a necklace, that would speak to the heart, and if Belle could speak to the beast's heart, maybe she could get him to open it. Belle carried the book back to the fireplace, intending to reread it. She had a plan now. She would find the beast tomorrow. That would give her plenty of time to work up her nerve, and she would ask him if he'd ever heard the story of Androcles. But as Belle neared the hearth, she saw she wouldn't have to wait until tomorrow to put her plan into action. For the beast was standing in the doorway in in his dressing gown, a candelabra in his paw, and a worried expression on his face. And that's where we'll leave it. Stay tuned for more of Lost in a Book, Chapter 20. Thanks for watching and listening, and have a good rest of your day. And please leave any likes and feel free to subscribe. Thanks. Bye.